when this is long before the Celtic people. When people hear the history of Ireland, they think of the Celts, because that's what you see on the T-shirts, you know, the Celtic knots, and what you have to realise is that the Celts were actually blow-ins fairly later. They didn't come until about 500 years BC. So long before that, we're talking thousands of years before that, there was a fairly sophisticated, highly developed culture here. You'll see the first signs of it when we go to Newgrange. That was the first agrarian valley that was settled. But what you have to realise is, under what you see here are still those remnants. We're going to see stone circles and cromlechs like that burial stone we saw this morning. And we'll see them in many places. And we won't see them because they've been taken down and used and built in modern buildings, so they were here. But in this immediate area, there's at least 400 stone circles. Still 400. So what I want to kind of get across is, you think about that kind of a rich culture going along, developing. This is pre-metal. This is carving significant educational and astronomical information in flint on stones, so that the community could use it. This is people with an extremely rich ritual culture and community culture. And then in 1157, which was before just after the Normans had been here, when the Normans came, it was still Irish land. And even though they were invading, and they were only one of many invaders, there's actually a book of invasions in Irish history, and there were 7 major waves of invasion before the latest one, which was the British invasions. Actually, the British invasion started insidiously. In 1157, Pope Adrian gave Ireland to Henry II. Now, what you need to know about Pope Adrian that I didn't learn till this year is he was an Englishman.
Norman King.
He was the only English pope. His name was Nicholas Breakspere, was his real name. And so he handed over Ireland to Henry to try to kind of civilize those savages, put it that way. And I say civilize those savages because that's the way we were spoken of. And there were waves of attempts to kind of settle the land from then on. And some of them highly successful. The early ones very unsuccessful, mainly because it was very hard. Look over there, Fox. Fox on the hill on the left, watching us.
Oh, yeah.
You see it, George?
You see him?
Yeah.
Wow, it's got a red spot right here.
And down below there was a mother horse and a mother horse and a baby.
So it's amazing who witnesses our history, and our passage. I wish they could tell us everything that's gone on, because we've learned a lot. We have to learn how to understand them better. Anyway, just to quickly recap the last 1,000 years. So waves of settlement and attempts at settlement. The early ones very unsuccessful because Ireland had many little tribal groups and areas. So they'd capture one and they'd say, sorry, you just captured him and we're at war with him next door, so you haven't captured the whole island. And it would go on like that, like they'd be small fights and small winning little areas, but then those areas, there was no central control. So it was very hard to say when you could take over the whole island, because you'd only got one bit and then everything would change and you'd have 3 bits over here and then those other 3 bits would be fighting with these bits down the road, and so you didn't have any for a bit and then you had another lot, you know. So it went on like that. It wasn't really till the 1600s that the settlement really began in earnest, with the, I don't want to say the support, I want to say the collaboration and of the peoples here, including my relative Red Hugh O'Neill. Because what happens is always when you've got situations where there's a dominant power coming in, small groups of people get set above other groups of people and given certain levels of privilege, and some people betray their land and their people for the sake of position, and that continues. And so with a certain amount of collaboration, that after Elizabeth came in, they began to really settle bits of the land, and from then on you have clearances of the land, same as there was in Scotland, and the replacement of local people by people from the outside, either English or later Scottish.
When you use the word evict, when you say clearances, it
Evict.
sounds too gentle.
It's evicted.
It's evict. I use the word clearances because it's the word used in Scotland. And they were put in reserves in a way, in the same way that people were given small areas in which they could live and grow crops, usually on the land of whoever the landowner was. And the way the laws were set up, the land then had to be divided amongst families, to the boys, not to the women. And then that was to provide for that person's family. So the land got smaller and smaller and smaller. So the only way that you could do was to leave or starve. So that's what happened. Then people left in waves and waves and waves. In fact, currently, the population of Ireland is about 4 million, and there's 9 million Irish outside of the island. And actually, this is the only time in the history of the island that people have been coming back and into the island, and that we have immigration. Every time before this, it was emigration as people tried to survive. So we're going to talk. I'm going to ask Ed to talk a little bit about some of the kind of images and the ways that Irish indigenous people were spoken of, so that you can see the connections with other people who are on this bus.